everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Leaderboard. Thanks for jumping on. This is Trey Honeycutt. I'm excited to share with you guys today. Today is episode 5, and the title of today's episode is going to be the consistency paradox. Okay, so I think consistency is one of those words that we throw around a lot that sometimes people misconstrue. Like they'll think, I think one of the things that I hear the most about consistency is I'll talk to agents and say, man, I just need to get more consistent. If I was just more consistent, then, I'd be killing it in the business. I just got to get more consistent at dialing. I just got to get more consistent at running appointments. My in-home has to get more consistent. And maybe all those things are true, but the thing that I tell everybody, or they'll say, we've always struggled with consistency. And the thing I like to share with people is there's no such thing as an inconsistent person. They don't exist. It's not that you're inconsistent. It's that you're consistently doing things that are getting you further away from where you want to go. And typically, what that really comes down to is you don't know where you want to go. It really just comes down to what is your reason for doing it. See, the thing I've learned is one good reason can overcome 1,000 excuses. So, I talk about this a lot. When this wasn't a podcast, I would talk about this a lot, that I was a personal trainer for years, and I'd gone through this transformation where I'd lost like 100 pounds. I kept it off for all this time, and I learned a lot from that. And then I went through the same process. I did that and kept it off for 5 years. I gained it back. So I've learned a lot about consistency. But I had this client one time. His name was Donald. I don't know if he's, hopefully, hey, I don't have permission to use the story. It's not my material. So hopefully Donald's not watching. But Donald would come in, and he would show up to his training sessions with like In-N-Out, like pizza. He'd get like a 2,000 calorie juice from the juice place next door. And he's like, I want to transform my body. And I'm like, well, I mean, we can't really work out enough to fix that. Like it's diet, People want to know how you get fat. It's diet. And that's how it happens. So he just thought it was the funniest thing. And he would pay me. And all the other trainers would be like, dude, why don't you just fire him? And I'm like, well, I guess that's an option, because as a trainer, you can fire clients. But I'm like, man, everybody's judged Donald his whole life. He was adopted. He had this whole story, And so I was just like, you know what? If Donald wants to keep coming back and just talk to me, then let's do that. About a year into it, Donald's showing up. And he shows up different. And he didn't have In-N-Out with him. And he doesn't have pizza. And he's not talking about his bad diet. He's serious. And you can see it. Like every rep was like serious. Everything he did was intentional. He was trying. And I mean, he was really trying. He wasn't just going through the motions. I'm like, Donald, what the heck happened? It's like, my wife left me. So I got to lose weight. So I find another woman. And I was like, wow, like one good reason overcomes 1,000 excuses. That's the reality. It's not that he's inconsistent. He was just consistently eating pizza and cheeseburgers and watching TV for 4 hours a day and not taking it serious. And he was happy. He was content. He said he wanted to change, but he really didn't. But what got him to change? What got him to consistently eat lean protein and quality carbohydrates 6 times a day, stop eating after 6 o'clock at night, show up to work out for an hour every day with me at 5:30? Like, what was the change? He had a bigger reason. One good reason will overcome 1,000 excuses in the business. So rather than just focusing on consistency and giving yourself a way out and say, hey, I'm not consistent enough, what I need you to focus on is what your reason is. Like Paul McLean set me free early on in the business because I got to this point where I was really just going through the motions. It's hot as heck in the studio, so I'm sweating like a mug. I don't know what that was. It said something went wrong, and I don't really know what that means. So I don't know if you guys heard that in the studio. That was wild. Like Siri just interrupted me. Is Alexa just like talking to me right now, or what's going on there? But maybe you guys didn't hear it. You're like, Trey just hears voices and gets distracted. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, Paul McLean set me free because he was like, hey, you know what? The reason why you're going through the motions is you lost your reason to do it. And he goes, the thing you got to understand is over time, your reason is going to change. And so that's what the focus needs to be. It's not just about what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? I'll tell you what one of the big things is. Half of getting what you want, more than half, 80% of getting what you want out of this or anything else is just knowing what it is that you have to give up to get it. More than 80% is knowing what it is that you have to give up. And so a few of the things you're going to have to give up in the business, you're going to have to give up jealousy. You're going to have to give up ego. You're going to have to give up being right all the time. You're going to have to give up time with your family. You're going to have to give up time on the weekends. You're going to have to give up comfort. You're going to have to give up sleep. You're going to have to wake up earlier. You got to go to bed later. Some of the habits that you think that you need to function in your life that are really just coping mechanisms, you're going to have to give up some of that too. Like when I started in the business, and I tell people this all the time because it's not this way anymore. It's one of the most dramatic changes that I've had to make is like when I started in the business, if I would spend a day like talking to people, I would need like 2 days to recuperate. Like talking to people for me was like hard. Like I don't necessarily, like I'm not really extroverted, believe it or not, right? So it would take all this energy, and then I felt like I needed 2 days of rest every time I'd have 1 day of like talking to folks, right? So I run 1 day of appointments, like 8 appointments, and then like 2 days I couldn't do it. Like I just need to stay alone in my room and look at the wall. Like I'm very much isolated that way, and I had to give that up. That was a coping mechanism that I used to cope with stress. I had to figure out something else that would allow me to do the activity long enough to get the results and still cope. We have to start looking at what some of our coping mechanisms are with, problems that arise in the business. 80% of what you want, 80% of getting what you want is just knowing what it is you have to give up. Consistency is, everybody's consistent. It's just about, are you consistently doing things that are going to move you closer to where you want to go? So once we actually define where it is you want to go, you say, Trey, I want to get to $1 million a month agency. Whose goal is that? Is that really yours? What does it mean? Trey, I want to get to a certain amount of income. Why? What does that mean to you? Like for me, it was never about income because I never had any money. So I didn't know what it meant. One of the big motivators for me is I didn't want to let anyone down. Now that's a double-edged sword because another thing I had to learn to give up is give it up what other people thought of me, other people's opinions, Andrew Taylor set me free in a lot of ways because he said one time to me, he goes, dude, you are so worried about what people think about you. And I'm like, well, it's important. Now, listen, I think it's important to get along with people. I do think that. Like, I'm not just a jerk just to be a jerk. If I'm a jerk to you, it's for a reason. If I'm a jerk to you, it's because I'm trying to affect some sort of change. Like I don't use my jerkiness lightly. When I do it, it's for a very express reason typically. So getting along with people is important, but not worrying so much about what everybody thinks about you all the time. That is something you need to give up. And what Andrew told me that helped me so much is he said, dude, you're worried so much about what other people think. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. You guys have all experienced this. Like you take a group photo and you're like, hey, before you post that on Facebook, let me see it. And what you're really looking for is like, what do I look like in the group photo? Like everybody else in the group photo could like have their eyes shut with like broccoli in their teeth. But if you look good, we can post it. And that's the truth. That's how people are. And so the reality is we spend so much time worried about what other people think. They aren't thinking about you anyway. They're thinking about themselves. And so that's one of the major things you're going to have to give up to have success. You're going to have to give up the idea that you can control every single thing. If you want the business to grow, one of the things you got to understand is you can't control everything. You can't control other people. You want depths of leadership in the business? Let people grow their own wings and fly. When they have ideas, don't just shut them down right away. You got to give up. At least I'm telling you, like I get on these, like understand what I'm doing. Like I'm talking to myself. It's me and this camera and these lights and I'm sweating, right? But I'm really just talking to myself and I'm trying to remember what a lot of the process was like. So you say, gosh, you say you a lot. Well, when I say you, I mean me. Okay. So, what the thing I was trying to say was that you got to give up trying to change everybody all the time. Some battles aren't worth fighting. And some of people's greatest gifts are the things that are going to drive you nuts the most. Like I see people literally squelch their business and press it down over personality conflicts. It's like, so my youngest son, I'll give you an example. And honestly, I use a lot of parenting analogies because this is a lot like parenting. This is really about like two things. Like it's about parenting and like dating. Like that's the key to the whole deal, right? But so my youngest son, Harper, one day, I don't know what he's going to do, but like from the time he was very young, he was very interested in like justice. Like that's Harper's deal. So we were at this ball game one time, and my wife, she brought lunch to us, and we were waiting to, for our team to play or whatever. And my wife had the food on the hood of the car, and it was windy. And I was telling her, the food's gonna blow off. I was trying to tell her because I was sitting inside. You guys were like, Trey's a jerk. He was sitting inside. His wife's out in the wind with the food on the hood. No, it wasn't like that. It was a lot of extenuating circumstances going on there. But my son Harper's in the back seat, and I was trying to tell Dre, I'm like, hey, the food's gonna blow off, And Harper's like, I gotta go tell her. So he jumps out, he runs over there, and he tells her, Mom, gotta take that off. It's gonna blow off. And my oldest son is sitting in the car, and he goes, man, Harper's going to get a job one day where like his job is like being the whistleblower at work, like the enforcer. And I'm like, don't knock him, son, because that's a gift. Like that's a personality gift. And what a lot of people do when two personalities like that meet, what a lot of people do is try to usurp over the other one. So one of the things I learned to do early on is when I have a difficult personality and we're like button heads, I'll settle down. I'll let them move up. I'll take the back seat. I don't have to be the one in control or in charge all the time. That was very, very, very hard for me. That's a learned skill. That is not natural at all. There's a few people on here who've known me since I was like 12. And you'll say, Trey did that? Yeah. I've learned to do that because 80% of getting what I want is no one had to give up. And if I want a big team, the very leaders that I'm trying to attract with those strong personality traits, I have to allow them to be themselves so they can lead. That's a skill. Like there's a give and a take in this thing. Like you can't win every single battle with people. A lot of the first few years in the business, I had a hard time attracting a top producer in the business. Like I would go out and I would sell, and I was consistent. I sold every single week. I sold a lot. I was always on the leaderboard. And it was more to it than just doing that. Because what I was trying to do is I would meet another strong personality and I would just smother them and press them down. And when I learned not to do that, those very difficult personality traits that I would encounter, that's actually what allowed the people to be such good salespeople in the home. The very thing that drove me nuts is what allowed them to be among some of the best producers in FFL history, to be honest with you. So that's a big part of it. Like there's always a give and take. There's a balance to it. I think this longing to have these set rules that always exist and it's always going to be this way. The other thing you need to do is approach this like everybody's the same, but everybody's really, really different. And one of the things I struggled with early on is I would coach way too soon before I actually knew the people. Like, don't get this wrong. This is the people business. It's people first. And the risk that you're always running in this business is to get so overwhelmed with tasks that you forget. And I'm just talking about building, and this may not be for everybody what I'm saying, but there's somebody trying to build this at a high level that this is going to make a lot of sense. When you meet a sticking point in this business, the answer is always the people. It's not the task. It's not the system. It's not the structure. It's not the infrastructure. It's not the CRM. It's not anything deliverable. It's not any task-oriented thing that you can manage. What it's about is people. So when you get stuck, put your focus back on the people first. Everybody wants to win, but everybody's different. And when it comes to coaching, you got to coach the player. And the players are always different. That's a major, major key that I had to learn. And I learned it by observation. You say, because I'm really observant. Now, anybody who's driven with me is like, Trey's like the least observant person I've ever met. Well, in some ways that's true, but I'm good at observing people. And what I would see Andrew Taylor do, who's an absolute master at what I'm saying, and I've seen him oscillate. I've seen him go one extreme to the other, back and forth, settle in the middle, make mistakes, come back to the table, like go back to the drawing board, back to the lab. I've watched this transformation over time. I was very observant of it. And a lot of that transformation was just learning this process of not coaching people or over coaching people too soon. It's a big mistake people make in the business. So the reality is, until people actually want to be coached, your words are really futile. In this business, everybody can get to $15,000 a month issue paid just by running numbers. Like you can be the worst salesperson, the worst insurance producer of all time. And if you go out and run 20, 30 appointments a week, you will write $15,000 just on the ones that like buy it in 20 minutes so you'll leave. And it'll be great. And they wanted the insurance before you got there and they had a check glued to their forehead, right? That's 25% of the people. Going from $50,000 to $70,000 a month that you paid, that's a skill, right? That requires coaching. The rest of it is just numbers. And so what Andrew, even though Andrew was a Hall of Fame producer every year that he sold with Family First Life, what I watched him do is go through this transition where instead of coaching and trying to fix everybody's problems, he literally just focused on the people and talked about the numbers and was encouraging. And by doing that, he allowed people to grow to a point where they could go out and write $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a month without overwhelming them and driving them out of the business with personality conflicts. That's not meant for everybody, but there's people on the phone that need to hear that. Like, a skill set you've got to develop is learning to it's people first, be patient. Not everything grows in its own time. Not everything happens right away. It's a process. And remembering what it's like when you were brand new. Yeah, I have this agent on the team, and I debated whether or not I tell the story because he's probably listening and he'll know that I'm talking about him. But man, this individual, now you know it's a he. This individual, he was in such a bad place when he started, and he was just scared, straight up. He didn't know what he was going to do. He's about to get evicted. He's in a bad situation. And he wanted to call me all the time and just vent about it. And there was a big part of me that wanted to say, why don't you quit venting to me? Like, stop pissing in my ear. Like I wanted to go hard on him, but I realized, man, he's probably not like this all the time. It's just the circumstance. So can I listen a little bit more to him than I would to somebody else? I mean, is he really making excuses, or is he just scared? Like, I don't have any hard, fast rules with how I deal with people. I treat every person with equal respect, until they give me a reason not to. But you say, Trey, do you just trust everybody? No, I actually don't. I'm kind of guarded too. And it's a two-way street. Like it's checkerboard management. They move, I move. They move, I move. It's a lot like dating. I'm not the person that cares the least is in the most control, by the way. And imagine the scenario where you said, Trey, like I've been happily married now for 17 years, right? So it's been a long time since I dated. I don't even know if they do like regular dating now. I think they have apps for all the dating stuff now. I don't even know how it works. But one thing I do tell you that's always going to be true is that somebody that's overly zealous pushes people away. Somebody that's over the top when the other person is like, hey, I just want to have coffee, and you're trying to move in with them the next day, like that pushes people away. It weirds people out. So you got to learn in every scenario, it's about them. It's not about you. Like, yeah, I want you to write $40,000 a month, but they want to write $2. I want you to buy $4,000 worth of leads a week and travel to Cincinnati and be a Hall of Fame producer. And they're like, I don't even know if I can write 2 apps a week. So a lot of where people butt heads is like, I'm trying to make you something that you don't want to be yet. Let's just have coffee. Let's just meet where we're at. And over time, we'll develop this relationship and we'll develop this belief and this idea that we can actually get to where we want to go. But that's going to take time, right? That's a big part of how I do it. Now, when I meet somebody and they're like, hey, I need to write 40 grand a month, my first month, and they're ready to run, I turn it up and I'm ready to run with them. If they're back here and they just want to write 5 grand a month and they're starting out part-time, I back it off to 5 grand a month. I walk with the walkers and I run with the runners. And I utilize the tools that are in place to meet people where they're at. And I believe in everybody, but I don't count on anyone. So I'm always finding new people. Now, I never find new people to the point where I don't have time to spend with the new people that came into the agency. It's not just about how many people you hire. It's about how many people you hire that do something. So a lot of the conversations that I have with agents that are frustrated, it's like, Trey, I hired 1,700 people and 3 of them wrote. And I'm like, well, you're a mile wide and you're an inch deep. I'm not saying don't hire at a high level, but let's go 5, 6 wide and a mile deep. How about that? Let's find 10 people, put those in play that I want to work with, and then spend time with those people, understanding that it's going to be a process and it's a lifelong. I'm trying to build a lifelong relationship with the agent. That's always been the goal. Like, a lot of the stuff's going to make very little sense short term, and it's going to make a lot of sense long term. It's like a lot of sense long term, but short term didn't make any sense. Somebody said to me, Trey, do you buy agents' leads? Yep. Trey, you let an agent do a ride along? Sometimes. Trey, do you like there's a whole bunch. I don't have a list of stuff I'm not willing to do. And I don't have like this checklist of what it's supposed to look like in a perfect world. Every situation is different. But I know if you're consistent about doing the work, you're consistently putting others before yourself, you're consistently trying to give the credit away, you're consistently allowing other people to step up and lead. And because the goal is you want to move from the back of the room to the front of the room, back to the back of the room. So when you start out, like, nobody knows you and you're just one of the normal people, that just getting started. And eventually you build real big and you sell a lot, and then people start listening to you. And then as soon as people start listening to you, you want to get the spotlight off of you and get it on other people as quickly as possible so that you can move away and they can move up. That's the way I've always looked at it. Structurally, that works really well. In practice, that's sort of hard because you're always having to stuff the ego down. You're always having to, intentionally allow people to grow, intentionally allow people to have growing pains and make mistakes and show them grace and not be so judgmental and focus on relationship more than just the task or the results. And Sean Mike is a master at all this, by the way. And the longer you stay around, the more you realize it. Like I could think back over several times where especially early on in the business, where I'd get a chance to talk to Sean and he would just look at me like this. And he wanted so bad to like leap and be like, no, he could just look at me like that. And he was real careful about how he approached it because he didn't know me enough yet. He was coaching the player, and I was a different player. I'm a different player than Paul McLean. I'm a different player than Mark Mead. Mark Mead and Paul are different players. John Wetmore and Andrew are different players. John Gavin and Matt Smith are different players. He coached the player. And that's my best advice. So the consistency paradox, I know I covered a lot there, but understand this. Everyone's consistent. It's not that you're inconsistent. You just don't have a goal of where it is you want to go. So focus on what the reasons are, and then find a few things that you can do every day to move you closer to those reasons, closer to that goal because of what's driving you. One good reason overcomes 1,000 excuses. And the other part of it is knowing what it is you have to give up. 80% of what you want is just knowing what it is you have to give up. And that really is the truth. So thanks for jumping on the Consistency Paradox, episode 5. We will see you again next week. You said, Trey, last week you said you were going to have a guest. Hey, this week, next one, I'm going to have a guest. I promise. We're just I stopped sweating because of these lights, but we're going to have another seat over there in the background and another camera, and we will have a guest on next week. So thanks for jumping on this. You guys make it a great week. I enjoyed it. Hope you guys did too.